All right. And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and next to me is my beautiful co host, Laraib. And it is the end, or almost the end. We were filming this before the Monday Night Football game, Rams 49ers. But it's the end of week 4, and a lot of teams are starting to find the direction this season, find an identity. There's still upsets. There's still a lot of fun to talk about. And we're going to get into some of those overreactions today.
Oh yeah, for sure. But Lewis, before we get into that, why don't we go into our picks from the last week, huh?
Ugh.
Oh yeah, I was just absolutely elated this Sunday afternoon watching all these games. Look at that, 13-8, the highest points that anybody could have scored out of all 4 weeks. It goes to me. I just absolutely knocked it out of the park this week with my picks. I knew Tennessee was going to upset your Indianapolis Colts. Now they've beaten them 4 times in a row. Lewis, count with me: 1, 2, 3, 4 times in a row.
The
Um,
history.
my Seahawks went down there to Detroit and they got it done over there. Just amazing game.
Scoregami.
Chargers pull out a game against the Texans, a really scary one, but they're able to get it done. Lewis, what about some of your picks?
First off, for a guy who's down 3-1 in the picks, you sound way too excited. I guess getting the monkey off your back, getting that first one. But I even said in the last episode, I was like, if this is a week for me to get crazy, it was the week to do it. I'll go back to my winning ways next week. Trust me. My biggest takeaways: Atlanta. I knew it. I told you. We both were kind of scratching our heads, like, oh, that's kind of fishy line for Vegas. They won. Washington sucks. And looking at the rest of these, man, it was just a bunch of tough breaks. I got Vegas right. You got KC. And we'll see what happens tonight. It's not going to matter in the end because, yes, your lock and upset hit. My lock and upset failed. So I am not in a good mood. But I am in a good mood, Laura, because we had another wonderful week of NFL football to look over and discuss. And we're going to go ahead and hop right into your favorite segment, our favorite segment, cap or no cap. Y'all know how it works. So, Larob, I'm going to throw the first cap or no cap to you. Cooper Rush just won his third straight game this season, fourth straight game as a starter, the only quarterback in NFL history to win their first 4 starts. So I ask you, Larob, Dak Prescott, cap or no cap, should be terrified to lose his starting job to Cooper Rush this season.
I'm gonna go cap on this one, Lewis. I know it looks like the hot pick right now. Cooper Rush is that guy. Wheeling and dealing over there in Dallas. But I think once Dak gets healthy, he's gonna be back into this offense. And there's gonna be a lot of questions we had. There's gonna be a lot of competition if Cooper Rush, especially this next week, if he beats the Rams. But going forward, I think it's gonna be really hard for Dak to not be put into the starting lineup once he comes back, just because of all the money and all of his chemistry and how long he's been with the team. If he does start losing, then we might have a little bit of question, Lewis. But I think it would just be a little bit too crazy just to have Dak sitting on your bench and you're paying him, however much, 30 million, 40 million a year, to have him sitting on your bench while Cooper Rush is out there. And we'll see how he looks against his Rams defense, Lewis. But I think, what this really does give the Cowboys is it allows Dak Prescott to really get to 100%, right? If Cooper Rush can go in there, he can do a decent job, throws 200 yards and 2 touchdowns and can not lose you the game, just do just enough to win. I think it allows Dak to get to fully 100%, and it helps the Cowboys in the long run.
I agree with you. There's nothing that Cooper Rush is doing that Dak Prescott shown he can't do throughout his NFL career. And if this was a third round pick this year, quarterback in Cooper Rush, and he was just hitting the scene, you could expect a lot of things. Guys, this is his 5th year in the NFL. He's been a perennial backup, always in Dallas behind Dak, and it's always been known in all their training camps, everything. He never has showed anything to make it a competition in training camp and practice. So it's an over exaggeration or an overreaction to say that he should get the job. However, I want to throw you a hypothetical, Rob. They play the Rams next week. Huge game. They've been on a roll. If Cooper Rush goes to Los Angeles and puts the beat down, is it at least going to make the temperature in the room a lot hotter in some of these conversations with the front office?
Oh, it definitely is. Jerry Jones has already come out and he was joking about it. But if Cooper Rush goes out there and balls out against the Rams, there's definitely going to be a lot of questions thrown around. But still, I think Dak Prescott maybe it's definitely going to put pressure on him to perform better. After his week 1 performance, we saw him miss a lot of throws to CeeDee Lamb, to Noah Brown that we see Cooper Rush making. And so if they put Dak in there and for the next 2 or 3 games, he's missing those throws, there's definitely going to be some questions to be asked over there in Dallas, Lewis.
Yeah, I think overall it's a positive thing because you're winning these games without your starting quarterback. And for the future that you have your backup. And that's, as we know, the backup quarterback is one of the most important positions in the NFL because you never know what can happen. In the spur of a moment, your quarterback goes down. You need someone to go in to spell for him, and they have a good one in Cooper Rush. So I think overall it's a positive for the team. And it continues hammering to me that I was woefully wrong about the Cowboys so far this season. And they're making me they're making me eat my crow, as one can say.
All right, but moving on, Lewis, let me ask you, cap or no cap? After the beatdown that the Chiefs had on the Buccaneers last night, they are the best team in the NFL, the Chiefs.
This, no cap whatsoever. I mean, this has been the most well-rounded team in the NFL, despite the loss last week. So they're not unblemished, and there is an argument to be made that the Eagles should hold this crown. They haven't lost yet. There's no reason to doubt them. But I think what the Chiefs showed us on Sunday Night Football was we haven't kind of gauged this season is how big is the loss of Tyreek Hill and how much is going to affect this team. And before the season started, Laraib, we kind of went through some of the teams and we trying to gauge how their season was going to go. And that was our biggest question. But I told you, I said, this Chiefs offensive line is as good as it's ever been in this Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes era. And their running backs are really good. So my thinking was their running game would be a lot better. And a lot of their intermediate stuff, they get a lot of guys involved and could potentially be a harder offense to gauge and to defend in that sense. And it was just the epitome of that last night. 189 yards rushing from, really 3 people. Patrick Mahomes scrambled on some key third downs. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was, just a Houdini in the huddle, just getting out of all these tackles. You think he stopped for 2 yards. He breaks it out for another 6. And Isaiah Pacheco, the 7th-round rookie out of Rutgers, was just bowling over some of these Tampa Bay defenders. And their running game just set up everything in the passing game. And Patrick Mahomes reminded us again why no one should question who the best quarterback in the NFL is. The real question is who's the second best quarterback in the NFL behind Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. The real surprising part of what they did last night was who they were playing up against, right? That Tampa Bay defense, which we know is just, they have playmakers all across the board. That front 7 is nasty. Even the secondary, they have ballers everywhere on the defensive side, and they just made them look silly last night, running all over them, throwing it all over them. Andy Reid is just a fantastic play caller and a play designer, and he really put that on display last night against the Chiefs defense. And, the score looks a little bit closer than it was, but it was an absolute blowout by halftime, Lewis. And after agreeing with you, the Chiefs team, there's something to be said about teams that can go through adversity and then come out the next week and grab a win, right? And we know this Eagles team, 4-0, but they really, they had a little bit of adversity this week against the Jaguars team going down 14-0. But you look at this Chiefs team who lost last week to a team that were 10 times superior than, and they come out this week and the Super Bowl favorite and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they just steamroll them over, Lewis. And so, like you're saying, Patrick Mahomes in the pocket with time is the scariest thing in the NFL, and that's what he's getting this season, time in the pocket, once that offensive line built that chemistry. And so I have to agree with you, this Chiefs team is definitely the best in the NFL right now.
Yeah, you hit it on all fronts. And I want to give a shout out to the defense. You forced 2 fumbles, one on the opening kickoff and one just blindsiding Tom Brady, giving your team 2 short fields. And this Buccaneers defense, we both said it was the best, playing like the best defense in the NFL, only allowing 27 points in their first 3 games. However, they allowed 28 points in the first half alone against the Chiefs. So, is there reason for concern for the Buccaneers? I don't think so. I think it was just one of those games where things spiraled out of control early and they couldn't really get a grasp on the game. But at the same time, even if you wanted to do that, you couldn't because the Chiefs are so unstoppable. The brain trust of Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and everything they have, you trust that chemistry. And I want to give a shout out to the Eagles, but I still have questions about the Eagles, like you said, handling adversity. They did a good job, down 14 points this week, coming back and beating the Jaguars, but it's still the Jaguars who are still at home. So I really need to see them in a situation where it's great opponent, great showing, and then I'll be 100% in. But like I said, I agree with you. Chiefs are the best team in the NFL. Moving on, Laraib. Speaking of an AFC West team, the Denver Broncos just lost their second game of the season, standing at 2-2. However, they lost to the winless Las Vegas Raiders. And not only did they lose, but they lost key pieces on both sides of the field, losing Javonte Williams with a torn ACL, praying for his recovery for the whole season, and Randy Gregory with another knee injury, expected to miss 2 to 6 weeks, give or take. But with these losses and the loss on Sunday, Laraib, are the Broncos officially doomed to miss the playoffs this season?
I'm gonna say no on that, Lewis. I still really like the build. No cap, right? No cap. That's the segment. No, I'm gonna have to say no. I'm gonna say cap on that, Lewis. They are not doomed. No, I still really like the roster of this team overall. You think about all the playmakers that they have, all across the board. Patrick Surtain had his coming out party was last week, or excuse me, this weekend going up against Davante Adams. He was on him all game long, Lewis. Batting balls down. Just getting up all in his face. And you were talking about Davante Adams, maybe the best receiver in the NFL. And so they really got a lockdown guy there. And then just the defense overall. I know this week you give 30 points to this Raiders team, but overall the past couple of weekends, they've been really playing well. And so you look at the rest of this AFC, Lewis, overall, they're 2-2. The Broncos are 2-2. And everybody else, let me list some teams off for you that are also 2-2. Jacksonville is 2-2. Cleveland is 2-2. Cincinnati is 2-2. Tennessee is 2-2. Baltimore is 2-2. The Chargers are 2-2. So there's a lot of 2-2 teams in here, Lewis, in the AFC, and it's still a wide open race for anybody to come in here and take it. And so for this Broncos team, I just like Russell Wilson. We saw he had 2 touchdowns, 2 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown. He kind of almost looked like his former self, getting out of the pocket, having some nice rushing plays. And so I just like how the chemistry for this team is going to build. And then going to Thursday night game, we'll talk about it a little bit. I'm playing against this Indianapolis Colts team who I don't think is very good. They might have season of success, Lewis.
I think you're looking past some of the biggest problems on this team, and Russell Wilson is one of the biggest problems for this team. He threw 2 touchdowns. Yeah, well, Derek Carr threw 3. I mean, how are you going to keep up with potent offenses when you are just not that potent yourself? This receiving group is inconsistent. Cortland Sutton caught a touchdown, good for him. But like the rest of them, kind of banged up, injured, and they lost their biggest weapon, I would argue, out of the backfield, and probably on their entire team in Javonte Williams for the rest of the year. And there's no hope of even giving him back probably next year. It was that severe. And obviously, prayers up for him. I hope he has a speedy recovery. But Nathaniel Hackett has not been a proven coach. And in this AFC, it's just too competitive. And yeah, you're right. They're at 2-2. So theoretically, they're on the same plane as a lot of these other teams, but their losses have been so much more concerning. And their wins have been so much more concerning that it's hard for me to see this team really, even if they get to the playoffs, being competitive whatsoever. They have huge weaknesses on their team. That offensive line is not good. I thought it'd be a lot better than it was entering the season, but Garrett Bowles, who got a big contract, it's just how many killer holding penalties and sacks given up happened in that Raiders game alone. And we saw in the 49ers game as well, he was getting beat like a drum by Nick Bosa. So you're going to face these better pass rushes later in the season. And then later in the season, we know defense and offensive lines are really what keep your team going. Losing Randy Gregory was another huge injury. There's just a lot of things that are building up for this team that you're like, ultimately, you need to trust this quarterback and this coach, and I trust neither of them to get the job done. And there's some other AFC teams that, honestly, I just trust a lot more.
Well, I do agree with you. The coaching is definitely one issue. I feel like if they would have had Vic Fangio from last year, that would have been better than when they are with rookie head coach Nathaniel Hackett. We know they brought in Nathaniel Hackett from Green Bay, and I think what the Broncos were really expecting, Lewis, I'm being honest with you, is that they were really expecting to bring in Aaron Rodgers over from Green Bay, and that's why they're not ready at all for the system with Russell Wilson. And so I think it's going to take some time for them to get acclimated. I know it's week 4 heading into week 5, and they're going to have to be, have to pick up the pace if they want to learn this offense quickly and do something for the rest of the season. But I just feel like Russell Wilson, he can get it done. And the level playing field is exactly what they need. The 2-2 with everybody else, they're right there. Randy Gregory out for 2 to 6 weeks, so he's coming back. And then Javonte Williams, obviously he's gone, but Melvin Gordon, they have him For that same
Stop.
exact
He's
reason.
nowhere near Javante. Stop.
Okay,
You watch the
obviously
games.
he's not on that
Stop.
level, but we've seen
It's a
him
loss. It
when
is
he
a
was with the
loss.
Chargers. When he was with the Chargers, he was a
When?
great
Like 5 years
when he
ago?
was still a great receiving back, and they have Mike Boone as an RB2.
Oh,
Let's
Mike
see what they
Boone.
can do, Lewis.
It's a loss. It's a loss that you cannot replace Javante Williams. And it's a net loss for a bad offense already, an offense that is struggling. And you said they need to figure it out. Well, they better figure it out quick because you still have 2 games against the Chiefs. You have 2 games against the Chargers. You still have to play the Raiders, who just beat you again, and other tough games against the Titans, the Ravens, and the Cardinals. So, like, where are the wins? And the Rams as well. So if you don't figure this offense out quickly, you're going to be spinning out of control. And there's nothing they're 2-2. They're not awful. Like, they can get out of this, but there's too many roster and just front office issues with this team that give me pause. This team is not making the playoffs. So you might have more faith in them because you still have a little Russell Wilson bias, but it's time to wake up and realize what you've been watching from Russell Wilson, quite frankly, for the last 5 years. Decline.
All right, Lewis. I think you have a question for me.
Yes, Laraib. So the Green Bay Packers had a very, very scary game against the New England Patriots at home, despite being 9.5-point favorites, and some websites that going up to 10.5 before the game. They almost lost to a third-string starting quarterback for New England in Bailey Zappi. Meanwhile, the Minnesota Vikings picked up their 3rd win in the season in London. So for the Packers, how are cap or no cap? This win, although it is a win, and you love just the wins with no context, how concerning is this for the playoff chances, or cap or no cap? The Packers should be deeply concerned with making the playoffs this season.
Lewis, as much as I hate the Packers, as much as we both hate Aaron Rodgers, I can't in good conscience say that they're going to miss the playoffs. Okay. The Eagles are one of the teams that have the cakewalk schedule in the NFL, and the Packers are right there with them with another cakewalk schedule. For the rest of the season, they don't play any good teams, Lewis, besides, these 4: Bills, Cowboys, Eagles, Rams. Okay. Besides those 4 teams, I don't think they really have anything difficult. So as much as this game looks like it was really scary for them, going to overtime against Bailey Zappi at home, and potentially lose this game, they still come out and win it. I think they're still gonna make the playoffs. Okay. But just talking about Aaron Rodgers, he looked lazy, he looked clumsy in that pocket yesterday. In the first half, throwing for less than 100 yards. That defense really, they gave up less than 200 yards total offense to Zappi and this rushing attack, but still Aaron Rodgers couldn't get it done time after time. We saw a drop out of Romeo Doubs. And so I think it's going to take some time for Rodgers. It's still taking some time to get acclimated with the receivers, but Christian Watson had a rushing touchdown yesterday. Romeo Doubs could have had 2 touchdowns yesterday. And so I really like the weapons that they have, Lewis, but just yesterday they were not playing well. But as for the playoffs hopes, I think they're still riding high.
You really like the weapons on their team? That's what you said? Like,
Well,
I
Aaron
really
Jones and
like the
A.J. Dillon are
Bengals
really
weapons.
good.
Yeah, sure. But weapons, I mean, yeah, I'm high on Romeo Doubs. I love me some Romeo Doubs. But there's still the constant miscommunication. And so let me answer my own question. Will the Packers miss the playoffs? No, they're going to make the playoffs. The bigger concern for them is losing out on the division and potentially a high seed in the NFC, because this is a team that we know doesn't struggle or doesn't do well with adversity. If adversity hits, a certain quarterback folds. And we've seen it time and time again. Romeo Doubs, he fumbled, I think, in this game. Something happened early in this game, and he was not targeted again until that last. So he had a touchdown, and then the next drive he had a fumble. He was not targeted again until that last touchdown drop that he had. So he better be lucky if Aaron Rodgers even tells him hi, today at practice, if he even looks his way. So we know that when adversity hits this team, it's going to be tough. But like you mentioned, the reason I say no, they're not going to the playoffs is, the schedule is really favorable going forward. You said 4 teams, I counted 5. The game at home against the Vikings is still going to be a tough game.
Right.
So, but even then, that would put if they lost all those games, I don't think they're going to lose all of those games. That would put their loss total at 6. 11-6 is getting in the playoffs in the NFC, especially looking at some of these other NFC playoff teams. Not looking too great so far this season. So, yes, I do think they're going to miss the playoffs. And there are some things you can look at in this team and say they're going to get better. Like these receivers are going to get better, but they're not going to be Devontae Adams. What really is going to help this team is a man with 3 names, Odell Beckham Jr. If they manage to get OBJ in the building, now we're talking about a real contender in the NFC. But as it stands now, I don't think they can contend in the NFC. But then again, the other contenders in the NFC don't look like they can do it either. So a lot of season left. It's hard to write off a coach quarterback combo that's been so good for the last few years.
Yeah, for sure. Packers, definitely a team to look out for, maybe not. But Lewis, let me ask you a question. Cap or no cap?
Gotcha.
After the Panthers lost to the Arizona Cardinals weekend, Matt Rule will be the first head coach fired in the NFL this season.
No cap. What are we talking about here? It's like, what has he shown? I saw a beautiful stat, Laraib. In games in which the opposing offense has scored more than 16 points, the Panthers are 1-17 under Matt Rule. Laraib, the league average offense, the league worst average offense, like if you take their whole season and combine what their average score is around 17 points. What is wrong with this offense? And I've talked about it every single time I bring up the Panthers, and I'm not going to stop. Why did you hire Bob McAdoo and then proceed to really mess up the offensive line and bring in Baker Mayfield? I thought Baker was going to have a really good season. Not really good, but a respectable season, a bounce back for him. And he's been really bad. The offense, quite honestly, Laraib, looked better under Darnold last year. So there's just so many things where it's like red flag, red flag, red flag. And this owner and David Tepper, he's a rich guy, he's a young guy, and he bought an expensive football club a few years ago. He doesn't have the patience. He's put in so much money into this team and into this franchise that he needs to see change. And he's not a guy who's going to be patient with, not even unsatisfactory, just awful, just detrimental type of decisions from Matt Rule and this coaching staff. Like the misuse of Christian McCaffrey. I understand he's been like not really that healthy this season, but when he's on the field, you put your all into him. He can single-handedly carry your offense, and you don't use him that much. Speaking of not using, how about one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL and DJ Moore, who's just been ghosted by Baker Mayfield? Now, is it a Baker problem, or is it a scheme problem, not getting the ball into your playmakers' hands? They have playmakers. We know that, Robbie Anderson, Laviska Shenault, we know they have big playability. Where, just the overthrows, the underthrows, the tipped passes, they had 10 balls tipped at the line of scrimmage, the most in NFL history, by 3 on Sunday. By 3. That's 10 plays. That's a quarter of your entire game. A ball hit the dirt because it was tipped by a defensive lineman. There needs to be huge changes in Carolina. Quarterback, general manager, head coach. This team is awful, and the Saints lost to them.
Well, Lewis, you bring up great points. But one thing that does give me some hope in Carolina is a quarterback change. I know you told me before we started this episode that Matt Rule has already come out and said that Baker Mayfield will be the starting quarterback. But like you said, if David Tepper comes in there, puts a lighter underneath his seat and says, you know what, Baker's out, and put in Matt Corral.
The lighter's under his seat. The lighter's already there.
Or put in Sam Darnold. Then maybe, he has to do that. So maybe this offense can start looking up. I know how much you just hate this Carolina Panthers team, but somebody who I hate even more is the Washington Commanders, Lewis. Okay. Now Ron Rivera has had some time in this and with this Washington team, and they haven't produced at all, Lewis. I know how much you hate the Carolina Panthers offense. Well, they rank 18th in the league. Washington tied for 26th. Okay. Carolina defense, 19th in points allowed. Washington 29th in points allowed, Lewis. And so you talk about a team who's underperforming. They brought in Carson Wentz. They had some high expectations. Jahan Dotson has been playing very well, but this team is still struggling, Lewis. And so I know Matt Rule. He's all the favorites on everybody's on the sports books. but Ron Rivera is right there with him, Lewis.
I see where you're going with this, and I do agree with you that Ron Rivera does have a hot seat, but I think the difference between him and Rule is Rivera's had a pedigree around this league. He, is a very respected head coach, great human being. He's been through a lot. So I think if the Commanders were to fire him, they would wait and do it at the end of the season. David Tepper has no reason, no patience on why he can't fire Matt Rule. I was surprised not to see it on my phone this morning. So that's the reason why I would say Matt Rule is the most likely candidate. But you're right. Ron Rivera is not doing a great job. He's just not utilizing Carson Wentz to Carson Wentz's fullest potential.
Oh, right.
Obviously, that's the only way I can explain. I was trying to think of why they were not winning, and yeah, that's a good reason. Coaching. But I any other answer besides Matt Rule, and we said before that game against the Cardinals, the loser of that game, that coach is getting fired first this season. So Cliff, you get to keep your job for another 2 weeks. Good job. Let's see if you can go and win your next one. So yeah, very disappointed with Matt Rule. And it's not that I'm a Saints fan. Trust me. I don't mind. Atlanta's playing really well. Good for them. But the thing with Carolina is just poor decision, which honestly I'm fine with. I love when they make poor decisions because it should help the Saints. But
you hate it when DJ Moore doesn't play well on your fantasy team.
That is also true. But the thing is, I know they could be successful if they use DJ Moore the right way. So there's a lot of things that just make me upset for this team. And I do think a coaching change is, in a lot of people's eyes, the best way to make that change. But Christian McCaffrey only gets older and more expensive. So we'll see how things go with them. But now, Laraib, we're going to move on. So to a Thursday night game between the Dolphins and the Bengals, in which the Dolphins lost their first game of the season, still sitting at 3-1, looking good. However, the big storyline from that game, Tua Tagovailoa suffered a horrible concussion, hard for a lot of people to watch. Amazon loved showing it. So after that loss, and it looks like Tua Tagovailoa is not going to play this upcoming week, and with a lot of pressure from the public, who knows how long Tua is going to be out. So I ask you, Laraib, cap or no cap, with these recent developments in Miami, could the Dolphins potentially miss the playoffs this season?
They could definitely miss the playoffs, Lewis. But I think we've seen Teddy Bridgewater. He's come in for the Saints. He's been there for the Broncos. He's been there for the Panthers. He's a serviceable backup in the league. And with the playmakers that he has on the outside, with Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert in the backfield, I think they still have a solid chance. Listen, when you're up 3-1, that gives you a little bit of cushion for error, right? I know a lot of the rest of this, the AFC is sitting at 2-2, right? So to be at 3-1, to still have the number one seed in the AFC, gives you a little bit of cushion. Teddy Bridgewater, he can build some connection with Jalen Waddle. As long as that arm is still fired up and at 100% power, all he needs to do is chuck it deep, and Tyreek Hill is going to be down there somewhere to grab the touchdown ball. And so I feel like they have, still a sizable chance to make the playoffs, Lewis. And, the thing surrounding Tua, if he's not playing this week, we don't know how long he's going to be on. Maybe they're going to be so cautious they just shut him down for the season. But I feel like he could still come back in the later half of the season and do something for this Dolphins team.
Yeah, we both kind of figured, even though Miami was my upset, I just thought they were the better roster than the Bengals. That's why I picked them to beat the Bengals last week. And honestly, it was looking pretty good before Tua went down. I'm not going to overreact to this Dolphins game. And yeah, like you said, Teddy Bridgewater is a suitable backup. And last year on the Broncos, he is actually putting up more points per game than the current quarterback is. I bet they're missing Teddy Bridgewater this year, but I know they are. So I know he's going to do a good job in Miami because we've seen him come in and be a good backup quarterback. Plus, their schedule isn't too bad going forward. So I think they're fine. Plus, their roster is really good. They just came off a huge win at Buffalo going into that Thursday night game. And they were still competitive for the most part until the fourth quarter when the Bengals really pulled away and showed maybe some of that, all those plays on defense for the Dolphins kind of caught up to them. And they just couldn't keep up with the Bengals. So I think, they're going to make the playoffs because the Broncos aren't. And I still think they're going to be fine. But let me go on a little side, right? The way
Here we go.
The Dolphins handle the Tua situation, does that give you any, what championship or what, successful playoff team has had this type of controversy to start a season. Like, in what world at the end of this year are we looking at a Miami Dolphins Super Bowl? There's none. Which Super Bowl champion has been able to look back at their season? Well, yeah, we had our owner suspended for half the season because we tried tampering to get Sean Payton and Tom Brady. Which, yeah, sure, go ahead, do your thing. And then all the stuff with potentially paying cheerleaders for sex in the locker room with Stephen Ross, and no big deal. And then there's this huge concussion scandal where we obviously see Tua go down in that Buffalo game. He is struggling to get off the field, falling down, and after he hit the back of his head on the ground, and the lead neurospecialist for the Dolphins and the team doctor come out and say he's cleared. It's not a concussion. He can go. He goes back into that game. He wins in the game. Good job. You won the football game. Now let's go jeopardize your health on Thursday. And then we see what happens in the Thursday night game where you just cannot erase that memory of the way he looked on the field after he was brought down. And I just think the NFL really has to look at this concussion protocol and what they're doing and just make it 10 times more strict. There should be no gray area. There should be no room for interpretation. If you show signs of concussion, you're out. You're out for the game. Even if you don't have concussion, if it's a back or ankle thing, great. You can play next week. We're not going to put there was a quote from Carson Palmer in a offseason thing where he said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when the first person in the NFL who's playing dies on the football field. And if you want to erase any possibility of a potential casualty on your football field for such a huge brand, then you need to take every ambiguity, every question out of the entire question, because it should be no doubt he shows signs of mental instability, take him out for the rest of the game, even if it's something else, just to be safe and keep your public image, which we know you care so much about, NFL. Sorry, that was my little aside.
No, I don't agree with you. And you think back to the Bills game where he's wobbling off the field. And I mean, everybody watching at home, they know, or they can at least tell, that is not a back injury. That is 110% a concussion injury. And, they come out and they say, oh, it was a back. And that kind of puts some doubt in our minds of what exactly the type of injury that was. But I mean, that was just absolutely ridiculous about what they did. And so whenever everybody's watching the game, right? Everybody in the stands are watching the game. The owners watching the game. The general managers are watching the game. Everybody's eyes are on the field watching that game. And you watch the quarterback get up all wobbly, shaking around after you saw the back of his head slam into the turf, and you come out and you tell us, oh, it was just a back injury. And you saw just the terrible injury that happened on Thursday night. And also, Lewis, this has to do something with playing on only 4 days of rest and playing on Thursday night, right? Richard Sherman, former Seattle Seahawk, has come out and said, players hate playing on Thursday night. A lot of fans will tell you, oh, suck it up, grow up. The players just love to play the game. But I'm telling you, a lot of the league hate playing games on Thursday night, Lewis, just because it's just a short turnaround. They don't get any time to rest or recover, barely get to practice, and then they just get thrown out there on Thursday night in front of the bright lights and are forced to play as hard as they can.
Richard Sherman has no problem covering football on Thursday nights. I'll tell you that. He loves those paychecks from Amazon nowadays. So maybe he needs to come out and say something now that he has his Thursday platform. He might lose his job, though.
Well, moving on to my portion of the rant, Lewis. Players just hate playing on Thursday night. I know how much the NFL profits off it. Thursday night football, we're on Amazon. They just gave us $10 billion to cast our games on there. But that's also, I think, that's something the league should look into. Thursday night games. But moving on from our rants right there, Lewis. One final thing I need to ask you: where we just finished 4 weeks of football, going into week 5. Lewis, who do you think is the worst team in the NFL so far this season?
So you can't just look at the standings and say the worst team in the NFL is the team with the least amount of wins. Now, in this situation, you might not be wrong. It's the Houston Texans. They do not have a win on the season, but you can watch their games for the most part and say they've been competitive. They've showed that they have a competent football team. You can't just play against the Houston Texans and, do half the work. They're still a competent football team. In fact, you brought up the 2-2 thing earlier, which I thought was hilarious. The Chicago Bears are 2-2, Laraib, the same as your Denver Broncos. And I think they're the worst team in the NFL. I'm not joking whatsoever. The 2 wins against the 49ers. The 49ers are a good team. Come on. The 49ers, yes, the Bears are the worst team in the NFL. Their offense is abysmal. Passing for the least amount of pass attempts in the NFL, Justin Fields looked more accurate throwing a backwards lateral than he has all season, yesterday against the Giants. I don't know what is not getting figured out. Is it a miscommunication thing? Is it just the receivers are not that talented? Which we know isn't the case because Darnell Mooney had a good season last year with Justin Fields. Maybe Allen Robinson was a huge loss, but they did him no favors. This offensive line is awful. He's been in, constant scramble mode every single time he's been playing. And his decision-making as a quarterback is just, I feel like maybe the receivers aren't that good, but a lot of these times when he gets out of the pocket, he just tucks and runs. I'd like to see more of him. He has time to look down the field and potentially find, someone open, and he just hasn't been really showing me that ability to get out of the pocket and make a play down the field. Instead, opting for a 8-yard play, which he takes off and potentially puts himself in harm's way. So there's questions at quarterback. I don't know this coach. Honestly, I cannot give you. I guess he's done good enough to win 2 games, but haven't seen anything creative from him offensively, and he is a defensive head coach. The defense, it's not awful. It's not the worst in the league, but this offense is definitely the worst offense in football. It's hard to watch.
Yeah, Lewis, and for my worst team in the NFL, I'm gonna have to go with your Washington Commanders. I talked about some of their stats earlier. Tied for 26th in points for, and tied just lonesome 29th in points against. The team is -6 in turnovers this season, Lewis. Carson Wentz has 5 interceptions. And you go back to the Eagles loss, they only score 8 points. They lose to Cooper Rush this week. I know they came out week 1 firing against Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, but besides that, they've just looked abysmal. The offense has looked, not everything's looked abysmal. Carson Wentz has shown some flashes, but still at 1-3 in that competitive NFC East division, they just look absolutely terrible, Lewis.
My thing is, I've seen enough from their offense, and their running game has been solid, that I can't say they're the worst team in the NFL. And I like them, but it's hard to keep defending them. I'll say that. But they've faced really good defenses in the past few weeks. So it's hard for me to say that, their offense has been struggling. Well, it's supposed to struggle. I've been shocked that it's been struggling as much as it has been. So I need to see more from this team. They're playing like the worst team in the NFL. I'll say that much, but the actual worst team in the NFL is the Chicago Bears. There's an argument for Houston. Detroit, it's impossible to say they're the worst team in the NFL, but that defense is the worst offense-defense unit. It's even worse than the Bears offense. Oh, my goodness. You give up 48 points, probably 41 because Jared Goff threw a pick. 41 points to the Seattle Seahawks and Geno Smith, who have an awful offense. You let Rashad Penny run all over you, and you name the target. They were not getting off the field on 3rd down, and Geno Smith looked like prime Drew Brees out there, the way he was just not missing any pass. Now, we know that's not the case. We know Geno Smith is a bad quarterback, and we know the Seahawks are a bad offense. Yeah, of course. So I've been very disappointed with this Lions team. Their offense has been amazing. It's just they can't figure the defense out.
Yeah, plenty of questions for a lot of teams, Lewis, but it's only week 4. We'll check back on this in a couple of weeks, Lewis. But moving on, let's move on to Thursday night football. We have the Indianapolis Colts going to Denver to play the Broncos. Denver -3.5 in this one, Lewis. Who do you like in this game?
So
who do you like in this game?
So I just went on a rant about how I did not like the Denver Broncos, but I do like them in this matchup. The Colts, we just are the worst team in the NFL. They're not far away from that conversation either. Nothing their offense has shown me so far this season has given me any hope for this team whatsoever. And Jonathan Taylor has been dealing with an injury, and with a short turnaround for the Broncos, who knows if he even's going to play. And if he does play, he hasn't been very effective when he's been on the field. The offensive line has become one of the best units, probably one of the most overrated units in the entire NFL. And Matt Ryan is just, he throws you your weekly interception. He makes sure he gets it out of his system, and then he can start playing offense. Oh, it was so hard to watch. as I had picked them to beat the Titans, and we're
Four
not
in a
going to
row.
talk about it.
4 in a
We're not
row.
going to talk about it. But I do like the Broncos in the matchup. And there are some things in the Broncos that their defense is good. I'll say that even without Randy Gregory, I think they're a really good team against the run. I really like Pat Surtain, as you were saying. So especially he may not have the size, but he is that dog. And we know if he goes against Michael Pittman, it's game over. Like you lock up Devontae Adams, and it was lock up. It wasn't just safety over the top. It was he's breaking on routes, just out athleticing Devontae Adams, who's one of the shiftiest, craftiest receivers in the NFL. So what do you think Pittman's going to do? So if you take away their biggest weapon on offense, if Taylor's not useful, then what chance does this offense? All I'm asking for you, Russell Wilson, can you just put up more than like 16 points this game? Can you beat the Panthers? Can you put up more than 16 points this game? And you'll probably win. So please, Russ, Nathaniel Hackett, just play some decent offense.
But Lewis, you got one thing wrong. Michael Pittman is not the number one receiving option for this Colts team. It's Mo Alley Cox after he caught 2 touchdowns against the Titans this past weekend.
Pick him. Please pick him.
No, I would have to agree with you. I think it really comes down to Russell Wilson or Matt Ryan. Who you like more? And of course, I love my boy Russell Wilson more.
Love.
I just like Broncos, like you're saying, Broncos defense is going to be solid. Jonathan Taylor, I think most likely he's going to be out for this game. It's a really short turnaround, dealing with an ankle injury. I don't think the Colts want to, have him retweak it at all. And so no, without him in this game, look for them to check down on Nyheim Hines a lot more. He usually balls out when he's the number one running back for the Colts whenever they play. But I like the Broncos in this one at home. You don't have to fly all the way to Indianapolis. What the hell is there to do over there? So give me the Broncos in this one in Denver, 24-21.
I have it lower scoring than that. I have Broncos 18 to Colts 13. I just do not see where the offensive production comes from, I guess, outside of Mo Alley Cox for this Colts team. So the Broncos should get it done because they're a playoff team, right, Laraib?
Well, you're putting your money where your mouth is on this game for sure, Mr. Butler. But
I am, just because this Colts team is that bad. But that'll do it for a very entertaining episode of the First and Goal podcast. I just want to shout out, make sure you follow us on TikTok, Instagram. Check us out on platforms of YouTube and Spotify to hear these episodes. We will be dropping this on Tuesday around noon. And then make sure you listen for our Week 5 predictions that will be dropping on Thursday. So anything else you got for Laraib?
No, I think that's it. This is First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.